Well, greetings, everyone. My name is Michael Gear. I'm the president of the Pennsylvania Family Institute, and we are welcoming you to a PA Family Institute family webcast, educational options for parents. And as people continue to log in from across the state, I encourage you in the chat box, if you can let us know where you're logging in from. We see someone coming in from Berwick. All over the state of Pennsylvania, parents have questions. We want to help you with those. We will be taking questions from the audience in the Q&A box. You'll see it in most likely, depending on your Zoom setup or whether you're on your phone, you'll see a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen or somewhere else. You can use that to type in any questions that you will have. We'll be reviewing those. And we thank folks for logging in. We see folks from Hamburg, from Orwigsburg, Berwick area, Boiling Springs, all over the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So with that, I know there are going to be continue to be people joining us, but we have a great program and we want to get right into it right away. As I mentioned, my name is Michael Gear. I'm the president of the Pennsylvania Family Institute. I want to thank all of you for joining us here this evening and for the wonderful response that we've had. We typically have been doing webinars such as this in a series we call Live at Lunch at noontime. We thought, though, to serve parents, especially because of the topic that we're dealing with here this evening, that we do it as an evening webinar to give folks who, because of going to work or other issues, other concerns or challenges on their schedule, to try to do something in the evening. And we've had a good response to it as well here this evening. So, but we will be, this is being broadcast on Facebook as well. So if those of you want to share it on Facebook, you can do that, do a watch party on your Facebook page. And then we will be posting it on our website at pafamily.org later. So if you find this useful and helpful, you can let other people know about it by going to our website, sending them to our website at pafamily.org. Well, at the Pennsylvania Family Institute, we're an organization based in Harrisburg. I've been around for about 30 years, a little over 30 years. I head the organization. And on our team of 12 employees that we have on our team at Pennsylvania Family Institute, we range from grandparents like myself with 3 young grandchildren and 5 children that I have, my wife and I, Susan, have raised and chose a variety of different education options for them. We have folks on our team that have young children, toddlers at home, and people with children of all ages. One of our staff members has 7 children ranging in age from 5 to college graduates. So we've experienced education in a variety of different ways, but we don't only care about the families at the Pennsylvania Family Institute. As a matter of fact, part of our mission is really caring about all of the families across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, family being the basic building block of society, and the raising of children by parents and the help of extended family is of vital interest to us, and making it better in the Commonwealth Foundation and in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania for families. And so that is part of our mission. And throughout our history at the Pennsylvania Family Institute, an issue that we have worked on very diligently over these years is the issue of education, and particularly providing options and choice for families. And we have had great allies in that effort. Some of those you're going to meet here this evening. But in addition, in the situation that we face now, many parents are awakening to, hey, I wish there were more choices for me. And so as part of what we're doing here this evening is to enlighten you about the choices that do exist, but then encourage you to get engaged to help yourself and other families to expand the choices that are available, not only to you, but to other families as well. So with that, let me introduce our host for this evening, and sort of the brainchild of putting this event together. She's a mom of 2 young children herself, and the vital interest that she as a mom and her husband have for their children is part of what spurred her, as she heard from other moms and other parents about education options that they were looking at with schools closing, etc. And her name is Emily Krebs from our team at the Pennsylvania Family Institute. Emily, thanks for putting this together, and why don't you take it from here?
Sure, thanks for that good welcome and introduction. We are excited that all of you have chosen to join us tonight. I think we have a really good panel here with some insight for you. I have two children, and my oldest started kindergarten this past school year at a private Christian school. So he loved it. He was very sad when he had to spend the last 2 months at home. So that was kind of a heartbreaking experience. So we are hopeful that everything will, private schools will be allowed to continue to open for the fall, and that will go well. But I know a lot of parents started rethinking, what am I going to do? Maybe I should do homeschooling so I know what my child is doing. Maybe I should do cyber school. Maybe I should look at a private school because my public school is going virtual for the whole thing. And I had one friend who had to do online schooling with her 5th grader, and it was not a good experience for her. So, and we know not every education model works for every child. So, or every parent, every family, and a lot of you are uncertain about what's going to happen. So a lot of private schools are opening in the fall, and we're very excited about that and to promote that education. So we have Phil Paleo, who is a superintendent of a Christian school district here in the Harrisburg area. So Harrisburg Christian School and West Shore Christian School. But then he's also representing ACSI, Association of Christian Schools, here in Pennsylvania. And then we also will hear from Representative Clint Owlett from Tioga County, and Colleen Hroncich from the Commonwealth Foundation. She's also a homeschool mom and has done a variety of educational models with her children as well. And then also Tom Shaheen, our Vice President for Policy, who has, his children have also done a range of schooling. So we all kind of are in this together and exploring this, and it can be uncertain, but hopefully we provide some good information. So I'll turn it over to Phil just to talk about what private schools who are opening, what steps they might be taking that look a little different than they did last year because of COVID-19.
Thanks, Emily. Thanks, Michael and the PA Family Institute. I appreciate the opportunity to join this panel, and I'm so thankful we're being joined with parents and grandparents from all over the Commonwealth. So thanks for joining us tonight. I'm also a dad. I've got 4 kids. Last year I had a graduating college senior whose senior year got disrupted. I have another college student, and I have 2 high school students. And I don't know that it matters age, gender, race. We've all been impacted by COVID-19 and are trying to make adjustments as we go forward. As you know, there's little consensus in our country about much these days. There's even no consensus, especially in the area of how and if we should return our kids to school. I know at the Christian School Association of Greater Harrisburg, which has Harrisburg Christian School and West Shore Christian Academy, and I know the ACSI schools and private religious schools around the Commonwealth, we have decided to return to campus and do so in a physical way, do it reasonably and responsibly, do it in a way that promotes the health and safety of our students and staff, do it in a way that provides flexible learning options, even if a student has to be off campus for one reason or another. We made that decision early. Many of our schools, or Christian schools around the Commonwealth, made that decision early in June, and then have stuck with it even as things have changed around us. We did that because we think that the academic and the social-emotional well-being of our kids is critically important. So not only do we want to care for them physically and make sure that they're healthy and they're safe, but we also want to take care of them academically. The research is pretty startling. When there's a delay or where there's a gap in education, even 2 months of summer recess, there's a fairly serious 2 to 3 month academic regression that occurs. So we kept asking ourselves, what do you do if that 3 months of spring turns into 5 months, turns into 10 months? We must continue to maintain a continuity of education for our kids. What's also been tremendously problematic is the socio-emotional well-being of our kids, right? We see increases in worry and stress, anxiety and fear, loneliness and isolation. When kids are separated from one another, when kids are separated from their teacher, from their loving communities, from their churches, that's problematic. And so we were committed to bringing kids back to school on campus 5 days a week and do it in a way that we can mitigate the risks and provide safety and health and safety to them. And so let me talk a little about some of the things that we're doing to promote their health and safety of both the students and the staff. All we're trying to do is minimize the spread of COVID as much as we can while not disrupting their education. And so our students and staff, as they arrive to campus, and this is happening in many of the private Christian schools around the state, these are not uncommon practices as we try to keep kids safe. So as kids and staff come to campus, they will have their temperature taken. If it's 100.4 or more, or if they have symptoms of some sort of illness, we'll just ask them to stay at home. Right? There was a time where if you were sick a little, you kind of put the cough drops in your pocket and some tissues in your pocket, and you just kind of sucked it up and went to school or went to work. That day's probably over. And so we're just going to ask people to stay home if they have a temperature. We're physically distancing student desks and seats in the cafeteria and in the cafeteria. And you'll notice I said physically distance. We actually don't like the word social distance. We ought not social distance from each other. Even tonight, none of us are in the same room. But yet, while we are physically distanced, we're not socially distant. We're also increasing the frequency of hand washing and hand sanitizing. We're cleaning the campuses like never before. And schools are using a wide range of things to clean. At our particular schools, we're using hospital grade disinfecting materials, as well as this really cool electrostatic spraying system where the disinfecting material sticks to the bad stuff and really cleans the rooms every day. But not only are we preparing the campuses for students to return in a reasonable and responsible way, we are also creating for parents the flexibility that their child's education can continue even if they need to be off campus. And I'll tell you, early on, we thought, okay, maybe we'll do this if the entire school has to close down. But then early June, we started thinking, wait a second, this is not about the entire school having to close down. What if a single child can't come because they have a temperature or because their parent is immune compromised? So it changed our thinking all across the Commonwealth at our private Christian schools. How do you maintain the continuity of education if a single kid can't be there? So what we created is something we call a window into the classroom. It is real-time access to a child's classroom. So many times you will hear, well, if you don't want to be on campus, you can join a virtual academy. Well, that's great. But if you can't be on campus, that's a new teacher, maybe a new set of friends, in a new curriculum or a new place in that curriculum. The window in the classroom approach that many of our private Christian schools are taking is that a student, let's make it a high school student, 9 o'clock is Algebra 1, they will log on. In our particular case, we're using Microsoft Teams. They'll log on to the class, they'll see their teacher, they'll see their teacher's PowerPoint, they'll see the teacher writing math problems on the board, they'll interact with the teacher, they can interact with their classmates, and they'll have the material that they would have had if they were in classroom physically. In some regards, it is real-time reality education, even if they have to be off campus. In elementary, we don't do it as frequently because we think putting a 6-year-old on a computer for 7.5 hours probably isn't the best thing. And so what we do is we will have 3 times a day, 2.5 hours total. So a half an hour in the morning for Bible and gathering time, an hour in the morning for English language arts, and an hour in the afternoon for mathematics. What's absolutely critical in this is that they get to keep their teacher, keep their peers, and keep their place in the curriculum. And so that was really important to us. What you will find in private Christian schools all around the Commonwealth is these are caring, cooperative communities that partner together. They partner parents and grandparents and teachers and students and alumni and pastors and friends in the community. And so what we've developed is a way that whether a kid can be on campus or not, they can continue to access that caring community and their education gets to continue. Now, what we have found, between 5 and 8% of our families are taking advantage of that option for a myriad of different reasons, some for health concerns, some just uncertain. But what they are doing is we've seen an increase in confidence of, you know what, we're not sure what lies ahead this upcoming year, but we're pretty confident no matter what happens, my child's education with my child's teacher, with my child's friends, will continue and be uninterrupted. The other thing we're seeing is we're getting more and more calls every day. As people are unsure what their public school is doing, as they're unsure of whether they want a hybrid model where the child's at home 2 days a week or 3 days a week and in school 2 days a week, they're calling and they're saying, what is this window in the classroom? Can you Christian schools really do this? And our response is absolutely. We did it in the spring, we'll do it better in the fall. Now, a couple of questions that I usually get is Phil, what happens if the governor or someone closes schools like they did in the spring? I can tell you this, we've thought through that, and really we take this approach, and most of the Christian schools in the Commonwealth will take this approach. We see a difference between recommendations and considerations and mandates and requirements. If it's a recommendation or consideration, our kids are staying on campus, full steam ahead, continue the education in that model. If it's an order, if it's a mandate, if it's a requirement, we will have to look specifically on whether Christian schools, private schools are included in that order. Sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't. If they aren't, we'll remain on campus. The other question I often get is, Phil, but you guys aren't a free option. It does cost. That's true, it does cost. But what many Christian schools offer is need-based financial aid through generous donors, through tax credit programs and scholarships. You'll hear in a moment Representative Owlett and some legislation he's proposing, which would help families as well. And so we're excited. August 18th, we're returning to campus in person in a safe way, in a reasonably and responsible way. Many of our private schools, I don't know one private Christian school that is choosing not to open their doors. And so somewhere in your location, there's a Christian school and they're doing it reasonably and responsibly, and would love a phone call from you if you need help in making an educational choice.
Thanks, Phil. That's very, very helpful, very encouraging to hear about your opening plans and what schools are doing. So I think that was a great encouragement and a great segue to Representative Owlett, who has introduced some great legislation, back on track, education scholarship accounts. So I'm going to let him explain his inspiration for the legislation, what it does, and then you'll hear from Tom Shaheen about how you can take action to help support that legislation. So Representative Owlett.
Great, and thank you, Emily, and the team for putting this on and the opportunity to share a little bit about our Back on Tracks ESA legislation. Just a little bit about myself. I have 4 kids. I have an 11, 9, 8, and 5-year-old. So my 5-year-old is going to kindergarten this year. So my wife already, I think she cries herself to sleep already. It's going to be a rough day in a couple of weeks, but we'll be okay. And but I have kids at home, and one thing that I noticed, and something that I've been hearing about, is just the reality of when you stop education abruptly, as we did on, I think it was March 16th, it created a ripple effect into all of our communities. And it created a ripple effect into a lot of our kids' lives. To disrupt education as we did for 2, 3, 4 months now, we're going to see effects of that. And what are those effects going to be? Well, our Back on Tracks ESA legislation is hopefully going to be able to give parents the option to be able to invest in laser-focused manner and methods to help those kids that may have struggled through the closure and may need a little bit of extra help to get back on track this fall here. So that's what this basically does. I'll kind of explain it a little bit, and I'm sure there'll be some questions, and I'll hopefully be able to answer those the best I can. But I'll give a real life example. Maybe so much real life that it might even be my life example. So I have my oldest son is Colton. He doesn't really like school, but he's great at it. I mean, it's great at it. It's super easy for him. I'm jealous about it, but it's super easy. My son Calvin, on the other hand, it's a little bit harder. It's a challenge for him. Now, then you introduce, that's like a normal school day. Then you introduce, all of a sudden we're at home, and trying to continue his education, which his teachers did a phenomenal job. And I mean, everybody, I want to give a big shout out to all the teachers across the Commonwealth who I mean, these were challenging times, who had to really think creatively to figure out ways to continue education just like that. They didn't see it coming. So, but Calvin struggled some, and so he would be doing great in math, but not so much in language and reading. And so we're concerned, and we're hearing this from other, parents across the Commonwealth, that this could be a common occurrence. We're not sure how students are doing in all the different subjects. And so when kids go back to school this fall, which Lord willing, that's going to happen. It's so much needed. But once they do, we are definitely going to identify where students are struggling, and it's natural. It's a normal thing. You can't, like I said, you can't interrupt education for 3 months and not expect challenges. So how do we address those issues? There's a couple of options. We could give additional money to the school districts, and that would be one option. Or what our ESA bill does is we actually would give some money from the CARES funding to parents to identify, like I said, where their student might be struggling, and be able to invest in a laser-focused method in helping that student with a specific issue that they might be struggling with. So in our case, it might be Calvin struggling with English. So we can identify that and be able to invest in that specific area of his education. Colton, on the other hand, more than likely good to go, no big deal. He's going to be fine. So that's the whole idea of this ESA bill. It's an educational scholarship account. And the idea, just the nuts and bolts of it, is to be able to utilize some of the CARES funding that's available. So whenever some other ESA bills have tried to move and they've got some resistance, and a lot of it usually has to do with funding. Well, the beautiful thing about this ESA bill is it's funded through the CARES Act, which would be from the federal government. And that money needs to be spent by the end of the year. There's a little over $1 billion left right now in that fund. And what we're doing is we're targeting also low-income families first in our legislation, a little over $40,000 or less. And there's a breakdown if you have multiple kids in your household that we could give to you. But basically, free or reduced lunches is kind of where that is the start. We're going to hopefully invest in this bill. We would invest $500 million of the over $1 billion we have left. That would give us the opportunity to hopefully help around 500,000 kids across the Commonwealth and families be able to invest specifically and get those kids back on track. There's been a lot of research out there that states that, when students struggle and they get off track, it's incredibly hard for them to get back on track. with their classmates, and they will see that the rest of their life. And even in income levels down the road, it can be equal to that. So our goal is to invest in a laser-focused way in these kids and be able to help them. If all of a sudden there's not as much interest as we think there might be, so the first round is going to be for the free and reduced lunch, the low income, and then phase 2 would be if there's any additional funds left over would be opened up, and it's a first come first served basis. Now, I know a lot of you are probably saying there's going to be waste, fraud, and abuse in this, and this money is going to be wasted. Well, we're putting safeguards in place to make sure that it is used for educational purposes. That was very important to me because I want to make sure that the money, if we're going to invest this money, it actually needs to get directly to the kids in the most efficient way. And so we've put some safeguards in there for that, as well as making sure that it's used for educational purposes. Now, one thing that Phil talked about, and I wanted to just talk briefly about it, we did add counseling services into this as well. We felt that a lot of our schools across the Commonwealth is really the only safe place that kids have. And that's reality. It's not good, it's not right, it's not something we should be comfortable with, and that should really rub everybody in the wrong way that I said that, but it is the only safe place that a lot of kids experience. And so for them to all of a sudden be out of that classroom, for our teachers not to have eyes on them, to be able to be working with them for 3, 4, 5, 6 months, that's a bad deal for them. And there's going to be some emotional support that we are going to need to make available to our kids. So we did put counseling services as an option for this as well. So that's the basic gist of our House Bill 2696. There's also a Senate bill. Judy Ward is working on it on the Senate side, and that is 1230, Senate Bill 1230. So please take some time to look into it. A lot of the questions that came in were around whether this was a voucher program, whether people could use this for homeschooling. Things. It can be used for homeschooling as well. It is not a voucher system. That's a whole nother animal, a whole nother topic. But this is specifically an ESA utilizing CARES money here by the end of the year. I do want to hone in on that. It is available for homeschoolers. We've made it available in the bill. We've made it available for them because we realized that all of a sudden, when all of us started working from home, we're taking bandwidth, we're taking space in the house. Their education was disrupted, possibly disrupted as well, and they'll be able to hone in and see if there's something specific that they could use some of this funding for as well. So that's the gist of the bill. Hopefully I did that quickly and efficiently. Tom, I'm sure I missed something and you're going to catch it, but I'm looking forward to any questions that anybody might have. Thank you.
Yeah, I guess I'm not muted. Good. Sometimes I usually talk and I'm muted, so I get 2 stars. So this CARES Act, this is money that the federal government, recognizing the challenge that the COVID crisis has created, the pandemic, sent to the states for the purposes of helping people deal with COVID and with the challenges. And what we're talking about here and all of the things that are happening to families is specifically because of that. So this seems completely 100% sensible that the dollars should be flowing to help the children that are in need as a result of this and to help the families. So I just want to applaud you for doing that and encourage people to get engaged. Even if this ends up not being a program that helps them specifically, every family should be getting this opportunity, or we should be concerned about helping every family across the Commonwealth. And so I know Tom's going to be talking about how people can help and engage in it as well. Any other questions that others have about this, Emily or Tom?
Got a question for Representative Allett. Thank you for introducing it and for the innovation. You know, with the idea to in my view, innovate how we even fund public education, which is a larger question, but this is one piece of that where you can actually put dollars into the hands of parents who are making choices. So I applaud you for that, and Senator Ward, Judy Ward. But I think there may be questions in some folks' mind of, you mentioned the CARES Act funding. And in my view, it's sort of a parallel to what I think everyone has now read about in the news is the business stimulus funding. For rightfully so, for small businesses especially, who've had to lay off people and, close their doors, even if it's temporarily. And so this is sort of a stimulus, business stimulus, but in the education setting, which is normally not where innovation takes place. But there's folks like Phil and others who are administrating in Christian schools who are, really coming up with creative ideas on ways to achieve their goal of educating students. And so I think if you want to say a little more about the CARES Act and really where that concept came from to use this for funding, I'm guessing it's at least in part from what you're hearing from folks in not only in your district who walk the halls of the Capitol.
Well, definitely, and you're exactly right. This is CARES funding. Sorry, it's coming from the federal government. This is money that we received. I forget, was like 3.9 billion total, I think, and we've been using. It has to be used for COVID-related expenses. So I sit on the appropriations committee as well. This money can't be for past mismanagement at the state level or debt or other issues that the state might have. It has to be COVID related. And I would say, educating our kids is so important. To say that there's not going to be challenges, we know there's going to be, and getting these kids back on track is so important. So this is COVID related. If COVID hadn't hit like it did in the Commonwealth, our kids would have been in school and we wouldn't even be having this conversation, but they were. And so if I would say we should feel obligated and personally to invest in our kids. They're our future. To just all of a sudden say, oh, the kids had 3 extra months off of school, or, oh, they're going to be out of the classroom. It'll be fine. No big deal. It's a big deal. They're going to struggle, and it's going to be a lifelong struggle if we don't help them. So, and who better than the parents and the guardians to understand how best to invest? So this money, I feel like if there's ever a way to drill it right down to where it's going to be super effective and really meet the mark, it's ways just like this, and investing that to the parents who know their kids the best and want to help them. Will there be people that'll try to utilize this for inappropriate person? Probably, but what, we're going to do the best we can to make sure that doesn't happen, and get the kids the help that they deserve.
Well, Representative Allett, you mentioned your wife probably crying as she thinks about your 5-year-old going off to kindergarten. I venture to guess that there are a lot of moms and dads, especially moms across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, especially in school districts, that have said they're not opening. Mm-hmm. Concerned and even crying about what are they going to do with their child. They might have to go to work, or they might be a family with 2 jobs or whatever, 2 or 3 jobs, even trying to make ends meet, that didn't know that there was an option like what Phil has laid out with what private and Christian schools are making as options for on-campus education. And a program like you're proposing and this legislation would enable would be the bridge for those families, for those moms who are concerned about making sure that their kids can get back on track, be the bridge to help them do that. I've been looking at some of the comments that have shown up on the Facebook feed that we're doing here tonight, and people are commenting saying, I had no idea there were these options out there before, and I didn't know that that these things, I'm going to check into this. And so the combination of what they're hearing from Phil and what they can hear from Colleen tonight, but also hearing from you, not only saying there are options, but then helping people with a bridge to use those options with the CARES Act dollars, because of the major wrench that COVID has thrown into people's lives, is a really a lifeline for people. And I encourage everybody who's on this and to engage to help get this legislation passed and over the finish.
It's a tool in the toolbox. You said wrench, and it's a tool in the toolbox that parents will hopefully be able to utilize. And I think it makes sense. One thing that you mentioned with parents being home, and one thing that we're hearing a lot about in our district. So you guys probably have great internet service, right? So we don't, okay? So it's really actually really bad. So I record podcasts once a week in a vlog, and I send it to Harrisburg, and they edit it all up, and then they post it and all this stuff. I literally could drive it to Harrisburg, and I could drive home, have dinner with my family, change the oil in my Jeep, rotate my tires, and it would still be faster than me trying to send it to Harrisburg. So enter all of a sudden all of the kids at home trying to do online school. Like, that's a problem. Like, it's a problem. Like, it just doesn't work. And that is one of the biggest things that I hear about across the district. The other is devices. I talked with a gentleman the other day. He said, Clint, he's like, I'm at home working. The only computer that we have is the computer that I'm using. He said, like, what am I supposed to do? Like, my son can't use it. Like, I have to use the computer, and so does he. Now, what do we do? And those are real problems that we're seeing in rural communities, and with the internet and devices. So this would obviously be able to be used for a device if a family needed a device, to be able to continue, educating. There's a lot of different things that we could be used for, but it's important that we help these kids and help these families right now.
And a quick question, just in follow-up, that's come in the Q&A box. And by the way, those people who are watching online can use the Q&A box to send a question, and we'll pass it on to our panelists. Quick question is, how will people access this? If the bill passes, it becomes law, how does a mom or a dad who needs the resources, how do they access it?
Yeah, so it'll be an application process. We designed it to be a very short application. There'll need to be approved for it, and they'll need to identify how they're going to use the funding. That's going to be important, but it'll be handled through the Treasury Department is what we're looking at, similar to other benefits that they work with and deal with in the state here. So there are some other options that we're talking about. I actually got a phone call today from somebody that wants to talk with me about how this funding is going to be put out, how it would be some other options. So we're looking at that, but right now it's set to be the Treasury would handle, and there'd be an application process.
And Emily?
Hey, thank you, Representative Allard and Tom. I'll just say we do actually have an action alert on this bill. So if you want to contact your state representative and state senator, even if you think they're in support of it, or you think, oh, they'll support this, it's good that they hear from their constituents, and we've made it easy. You can go to pafamily.org/backontrack, and I have that in the chat, and we'll also put that up at the end of this. That's pafamily.org/backontrack. You enter one form, and it'll send it to your specific representative and senator, and you can share that with your friends to support that legislation and support Representative Allard. So a lot of times legislators hear from people who are angry with them, but feel free to contact them and ask them to sign on the legislation. I did want to segue to Colleen. We've heard a lot of questions about homeschooling, people who are looking into that because, then they don't have to worry about if schools are closed. They actually found that teaching their kids at home might be something helpful, and maybe they can even help their kids work on some things that they fell behind on in the spring. But a lot of people are just wondering, how do I start? Where do I go? What do I do? And Colleen has homeschooled 4 kids, or it might still be homeschooling 2 of them. So she'll hopefully give us some tips on that and some information. Thanks, Colleen.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest message I always tell people that are considering homeschooling is it's not as scary as it seems like it would be. Of course, through all this, we're hearing some bad stories about what kids have gone through when they're at home, but those are kids that typically are in some sort of extenuating circumstances. For a typical parent to have their kids at home, especially if one of the parents isn't working, homeschooling is a phenomenal option. And even for working parents, it's doable. It's trickier. My youngest was 11 when I started working, and it's definitely harder. She definitely feels a little more neglected at times. But we we've figured it out for the most part. And homeschooling, the great thing about it is it's so flexible. So your kids can be working at the level that they need to be working at rather than the level that the class is at. When my oldest was in 6th grade and she was at a private Catholic school, and a lot of times in math for her, she would be struggling to understand what was going on. She'd raise her hand and ask questions, but eventually you just feel uncomfortable if you do that too many times. So she'd get home and we'd spend hours on math homework. And, it just was, if they fall behind in a class, it's very difficult because then, it builds on itself and they fall farther and farther behind. So for her, homeschooling let us, she could slow down on the topics that she needed to slow down on. And on the flip side, they can speed up on the topics that are easy for them. So they're not sitting there, wasting 40 minutes of their life on something they already know. So it has tremendous flexibility in that way. And in terms of the legal requirements, it's really not very difficult. You have to register with your school district. And we have on the Commonwealth Foundation's website, we have a special resource center that we've been putting together, and we have a lot of homeschool resources there. And I go through step by step explaining that process. For new homeschoolers, you just have to notify the district before you start. So if school has already begun and you decide, this isn't working, you want to homeschool, you just notify the district. After they get the notification, then you can start. If you start first and then notify, you run into risk of truancy. So not a good idea. But once you've notified the district, then you can just take it off, and you notify them through an affidavit, and you list out some educational objectives for your child. Again, they don't have to be very specific. You have a lot of flexibility in what courses you cover and in what order. There are some legal requirements. If you go to our website, and it's commonwealthfoundation.org/Penn Ed. I'll have to double check that. I'll give it to Emily and we can post it in the chat. But for our resource center, I do go through there. There's a phenomenal website called askpauline.com, which is where I go to for all of my tidbits for, she's got sample affidavits, sample objectives, tips for finding. You have to, at the end of the year, you need to have an evaluator. She has tips for that. You have to log your days or your hours for homeschooling. So you have to log 180 days or else 900 hours for elementary and 990 for secondary. I've always done days because you can typically do school at home in a much shorter time period than it takes, in a school building. And plus a lot of times you're doing, if you go on a field trip, or if you've got, maybe you're taking your kids to, my kids did speech and debate. So when we're at a debate conference, it's just tricky to log the hours. So we always do days, but you can do it either, whichever way works for you. And you keep a portfolio. So throughout the year, you just keep track of some of the things you've done, whether it's math assignments, reports they've written, a science fair project. My kids save ballots from their speech and debate competitions. You put that all in your portfolio, you send it to, or you take it to the evaluator. She talks to your kids about what they've done this year. In some grades 3, 5, and 8, you have to take a standardized test, but there's 10 to choose from. The state lists that on their website. So it's not very difficult. It's very doable. Another tremendous resource is the Homeschool Legal Defense Association, which is hslda.org. And they are just phenomenal in terms of letting you know the legal requirements in your state. So it's a membership organization, but if you decide to homeschool, it's typically well worth the membership fee. It's a little over $100. And in terms of some of the questions that I get are, what does a typical day look like? And there's really not a typical day for us necessarily. I call it eclectic, our approach, and it basically means I'm disorganized. So, just different days have different feels to them. And that's worked for us. I've gotten 2 kids into college, so we're not doing too badly. And but there are other people that take a more structured approach. So you can buy what's called a curriculum in a box, and they ship the entire curriculum to you, and they have a daily schedule for you where your kids can just go through it. You can sit down with them and say, here's what we're doing today. Of course, when the kids are younger, they need more one-on-one time with you, and that's definitely when it's more challenging and more work for the parent. But as they get older, they get a lot more independent, and that makes it much easier for the parent. Another thing, of course, you can do is work with other parents. The big phrase we're seeing now is pandemic pods, but that's always been around. We called it co-ops. There's hybrid homeschool programs that some schools offer, and Phil, sorry, I don't know if some of your schools do this, but where they offer a la carte classes for homeschoolers, and that could be a great opportunity for them. I live in Grove City, and our Christian Academy here offers a la carte classes, so my kids take science there a lot of times because that's harder to do at home for a non-science mom especially. And so, foreign language, so there's so much support out there and so many resources. It's almost overwhelming sometimes. Like, you're never going to have a lack of resources with it, that's for sure. It's more of you have to put the brakes on your search for resources. I'm trying to think of some of the other questions. In terms of going back and forth, that's another question people ask. So if you are doing homeschooling just temporarily, it's probably going to look a little different than if you're doing it, you're just signing up for the whole rest of their lives or whatever. Especially if your kids are in high school, you need to make sure that you're staying up on the requirements of your local high school if you want to enroll them back in. Otherwise, they may miss some of the graduation credits. So that's definitely something to consider. It can be done. I actually have a friend who her kids every other year switch. 1 year they're homeschooled, 1 year they're in their district school, and she just sees benefits to both approaches. So that's how they've done it, and they've made it work. So, but you just need to make sure that you're, whatever grade they do biology, you want to have your child do biology. Otherwise, when they get back to school, they're going to be, in the wrong science class, things like that. So those are some of the things to consider if you are debating, switching back and forth between the different approaches. But in general, like I said, there's a lot of flexibility, a lot of resources, even free curriculum. And if you go to our website, we do list a lot of that in our resource center. So, and I'm always happy if you have any questions. I'm sure Emily's going to be sending out a link with contact information. Feel free to reach out to me individually if you have questions. If I don't know the answer, I'll try to find somebody that does.
So I have a question that you and perhaps Phil can also address along these lines. On the webinar as well, that we have joining us in tonight are pastors from across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, because we at Pennsylvania Family Institute, led by our Kurt Weaver, have something called the Church Ambassador Network, which has gotten many hundreds of pastors educating them about COVID and connecting with their legislators in prayer and a variety of different things that they do. Many of them have joined in the call because in the situation we're facing now with families in need for educational purposes, how to juggle whether it's homeschooling or Christian school or whatever. Colleen, first the question to you is, you mentioned co-ops and things. Is that a way that churches can perhaps be assisting homeschooling families in opening their doors or doing things to help families in that way?
Absolutely, and please do. That's always a challenge for homeschool co-ops, is to find a church that will let us come in, because some, maybe it's liability, or if it's not one of your parishioners or church members, then maybe they don't open it up. But it's such a blessing when churches do open up for us. And I've always found homeschool families to be wonderful community members. They don't tend to trash the place. They tend to be very respectful and appreciative. A lot of times they'll even do a free will donation if they're not charged. That's what we've always done. And it's a great way that you can serve your local communities, especially during this time.
And since we have pastors on the line as well, Phil, don't know if you might have a message or thing that you might encourage pastors related to what you're hearing from families, or way that churches and pastors can engage in helping the education of the children within their church.
Sure, absolutely. Well, our pastors are on the front line. They are hearing from their families the challenges they're facing. I mean, the other day, a school district in our area announced on campus 2 days a week, at home 3 days a week. And I, shortly after that, had a parent go, how do I do this if I have kids at home and I've got to go to work? And, if a family has half their income lost and furloughed, and pastors are hearing that. And, pastors can be helpful in directing, families to, hey, why don't you call the Christian school down the road? Why don't you see what options are there? I've heard they have this flexible option. Why don't you check in that? hey, I know it costs something, but why don't you ask them? Maybe they can help you and, and scholarship you and so forth. So pastors can be real gatekeepers and directors of folks in need to Christian schools willing to help.
And I'll just add to that, churches can help families afford to send their kids to the schools, even if the school may not have the scholarship available. I would encourage pastors and people in churches to look around at the people in your congregation and the children that may be in need to see if there are ways that you can financially assist them in that way, or just financially assist the Christian school down the road to be able to flourish, to provide options to families that really need it. And that's not just a COVID thing, it's a ongoing thing, because the school options for families need to be there. Whether it's, the public schools are free and they're there, although many of them are doing the 2 days a week or not even opening right now. But day in and day out, that product is not necessarily the best for everybody. Certainly not the best for everybody. And there are families that find that that education doesn't work for my child, or philosophically or otherwise want another option. And I would encourage people who have the means, whether it's a church or just individuals that have the means to be engaged in helping provide options for families. And some of that is through contacting your legislator to work on, to support the Back on Track bill with Representative Clint Owlett, the Education Improvement Tax Credit, a scholarship program that businesses and individuals can engage in because of an act of the legislature more than 20 years ago, has provided options for families. I know with your schools there and with the school where my kids went, Covenant Christian Academy, and others, all benefiting from the generosity of businesses who then get a tax credit as well. So that's an encouragement for everybody to get involved, because ultimately the education of all the children in the Commonwealth, if they're well educated, if they get the blessing of a good education, is a blessing to all of us and strengthens society.
And I appreciate that, Michael. Our schools are really extending themselves all throughout the Commonwealth, because there are families who didn't need some of them didn't need financial assistance, but they will only need financial assistance during 2020, 2021 as a result of COVID. And our schools are extending ourselves to make sure our regular families who need it, as well as some additional families. And we're all seeing an uptick in need. And so I appreciate that.
Emily?
Yeah, I would just encourage people to, like Colleen said, there are a lot of homeschoolers out there, and, joining together with your friends to, others that that are interested in homeschooling, or others that you may know who have been homeschooling for years, like Colleen, use them as a resource. I know I have a lot of friends who have now been kind of education counselors this summer, helping people get started with homeschooling, even hosting their own webinars with their co-ops. And we will try to provide a list of resources. We'll be sending out a follow-up email with the recording of this webinar that you can share with others, but also lists of resources, maybe where you can find co-ops in your area. Some may already be full, but it's at least worth reaching out to them, see what resources they may have. And then, HSL, Homeschool Legal Defense Association, HSLDA, the Education Resource Center from the Commonwealth Foundation, just a lot of information to help you kind of walk through these questions that you have, questions that come up. But I think it's great what we're seeing is a lot of parents kind of rethinking their child's education, not just doing what they always did, but thinking, how can I do this better? And, it has kind of opened a window to hopefully choose, the best education for your child, and maybe stretch yourself a little, but, with homeschooling, or even doing a Christian school, maybe providing a more enriching education than maybe you were doing before. Just kind of it always helps to rethink these things, and I think it's beneficial.
One thing I'd like to add is that we are blessed in Pennsylvania currently with educational options, even though they're limited. But none of that happened without legislative action, and the legislature did not take action without hearing from folks back home. So it's, you know, it's not really up to the lobbyists or the associations or anyone to, you know, pass that legislation. It really comes down to us. It's families back home who care not only about your family, but the opportunities that might be there for other families as well, as Michael said. So I encourage you to take action on the Back on Track legislation, but also each year we have to fight to keep the EITC program and religious liberty for Christian schools so that they can do what they do to fulfill their mission. But it all takes folks back home, and I'm thankful for those who are on this call and those who engage in the fight.
So Representative Owlett, I want to give you, we're coming to near the close of our hour together, but I want to give you an opportunity to have any closing remarks, as well as, again, a recap of the legislation that you're encouraging people to support.
Yeah, I would encourage folks to reach out. Like Tom said, we have to engage. I mean, there are other people that are engaging. I can tell you that. My phone rings all the time, and I get lots of emails. So people are engaging. It's time for us to engage as well. And it's so important. And your legislators really do listen. You may think that you're just sending an email or you're just making a phone call. We do. We listen to those. We, you know, when my phone's ringing off a hook out here in my office, you know, like we pay attention to that. So it is time to get engaged. And it's if you want to see something like the ESA bill and the Back on Tracks bill here move, we need people to get involved and call their legislator. Now, their legislator might already support it. They may not be a co-sponsor, but that's something you could ask them. It's like, hey, would you consider being a co-sponsor of this bill? I think it's really important. Send them that quick email. I mean, that's very, very helpful. So engage in this bill and any other bill that really supports the family. And I really appreciate what you guys do. Family is so important. The one thing that happened with COVID, I heard a lot of people were having dinners together. I know we had a lot more dinners together than we ever did, so that's a good thing. But continue to support the family, and I appreciate what you guys do to encourage folks to do that. So yeah, engage in the battle and the fight. It's important. Thanks.
I appreciate that, and appreciate your leadership on this issue and on many of the family issues that we work on at Pennsylvania Family Institute, and for the folks that support our work to enable us to do webinars like this and many of the other topics that we cover, and all of the work that we do at Pennsylvania Family Institute. I will mention a couple of things, or before I get into, I'm sort of going into the wrap, but Emily, and I want to see if there's anything more that you wanted to address, or Tom, or Colleen. Anyone else, any final comments before I wrap? Okay, I'm seeing no. So first thing is Representative Owlett and Tom Shaheen have talked about, and really all of us have talked about engaging. And one of the ways that you can engage as well is to engage at election time. And Pennsylvania Family Institute with our team has puts together a comprehensive nonpartisan voters guide that will be made available online and in print versions very soon. So be watching for that, with the ability to now vote early via mail in Pennsylvania, as well as vote in person. We'll be providing that information to you sooner. It's illegal for distribution to churches, so we have pastors on this call and others. Contact us at Pennsylvania Family Institute. I'll be putting the contact information here shortly for our voters guide information, as well as then resources like this webinar as well. Then I would also then encourage you in going to the websites. In the chat box, you'll see there links of some of the resources that have been mentioned here as well. I'll put a screen up here now, if my technology works well, that has the contact information for the folks. Are you seeing it? There we go. Thumbs up, good. So contacts for Pennsylvania Family Institute, pafamily.org and pafamily.org/backontrack. Back on Track is where you will find a direct link that will help you contact your state representative and state senator. Do it yourself, and then find 5 other people to do it as well. I'll tell a quick story from back in the mid to late 1980s. It used to be illegal in Pennsylvania, or unclear legally whether you could homeschool in Pennsylvania. And there were districts across Pennsylvania. It was kind of up to the individual districts. They were actually fining people and threatening people with jail if they homeschooled. And homeschoolers got together to try to get a law passed in Pennsylvania to make it legal across the state to homeschool. And one of the things that was encouraged to the homeschool leaders and to the families was something that was called the 5-10 plan. 5 face-to-face visits and 10 phone calls from registered to vote constituents in a legislator's district was typically enough to change their mind on almost any issue. Now, that was years ago, back in the 80s, so they didn't talk about emails, letters, phone calls, and face-to-face visits. Now, if you take that 5-10 plan and do the face-to-face visits and emails, phone calls, letters, 5 face-to-face visits, 10 phone calls or letters to any legislator, state senator, or state house member, typically enough to change their mind on any issue. Well, to make the story shorter, the homeschoolers set about doing that back in 1987, 88, and they did it systematically, that visit, the 5-10 plan, and by the time they had that legislation before the General Assembly, it passed both House and Senate unanimously, despite the opposition of the teachers union and many other education organizations. The voice of the people, especially on education issues, like parents speaking out on behalf of their own children and other children, really makes a difference. So let's do the 5-10 plan with Back on Track. Find 5 other people that will do what you're doing, to send that email to when your legislator's back in your district, to make a visit or make a phone call. With COVID, it might be harder to make a visit, but do your part to make a difference on that. So that's how you connect with us at pafamily.org. You can find our other webinars that we've done on this and other topics in preceding months there at the website. Then Colleen, commonwealthfoundation.org, you mentioned an additional link that's not on here that you may want to mention there.
Right, yeah, I checked it out. It's commonwealthfoundation.org/PENN, PENN, Ed Today. So Pennsylvania Education. So PENN, Ed Today.
And then Representative Owlett, that's your website there. Any other additions you would want to make to that, or is that the good way for people to get in touch with you?
No, that's a great place. If anybody else, if they want to follow us on Facebook, we do put a lot of resources out there and videos and things like that. So our Facebook page, which is Rep Clint Owlett, is also a great resource.
Okay. And then for ACSI, Association of Christian Schools International, both the national website there, acsi.org, then ACSIPA, which is Pennsylvania specific. And I went to that site, very helpful, and has a lot of alerts and information that can be very helpful to people who are concerned about education in Pennsylvania and want to advance. But Phil, also for your work as superintendent there of Christian School Association of Greater Harrisburg, if you want to tell us about that.
Absolutely. So our website is csagh.org, and maybe Emily, you can put that in the chat so people can see that, csagh.org. And so we start on August 18th and are giving many tours a day. People are interested in private Christian education all across the state as an educational option.
All right, well, with that, I want to thank our guests, Emily and Tom Shaheen from Pennsylvania Family Institute. Thank you for your great work in advancing all of the causes here, but especially for your work in putting this webinar together. Phil Paleo, thank you very much for your very comprehensive presentation and for the work that you and other schools are doing across the state to benefit children and families. And it's a blessing to the Lord, I know, for those options to be available. Representative Owlett, thank you so much for your leadership in the House of Representatives and for your constituents there. But what you're doing here is for every Pennsylvania, and we appreciate it very much. And Colleen, thank you, and the work of Commonwealth Foundation. And I hope you have a great homeschooling fall this year. And I didn't know you were in Grove City. 3 of my kids went to Grove City College, so they might have walked by your house at some point if they were behaving. Anyway, so with that, thank you all for joining us, and we will see you next time. And again, share this on Facebook. If you have Facebook, go to PA Family Council, or Pennsylvania Family Council, then you can share this link and other people can watch it. Thank you, and God bless.